Thanks, Chair. Thanks to the witnesses. I know, Mr. Dunn. I was late because I was on leaders' questions. Mr. Dunn and Mr. Hayes. Is there a third person there with you?
Mr. Doherty.
Oh,
yeah.
Mr.
Right.
Doherty.
First of all, thanks for coming in. Mr. Hayes, on Project Woodland, and Mr. Doherty is there, or either you can answer it. Is Mr. Doherty project manager, or is he an advisor? And further to that, what is your role, Mr. Hayes, on Project Woodland?
So, to answer that, the Joe O'Hara report identified correctly, I think, that there was a lack of project management expertise in the department for the delivery of a project on the scale of Project Woodland. We immediately responded to that by going out and recruiting a project manager, an expert, Eamon Doherty, who has long experience in this space, and obviously Eamon can speak for himself on these particular issues.
Yeah, but just to clarify, is Mr. Doherty the project manager? That's it.
For the delivery of Project Woodland.
Right, so he's the project manager. And what's your role?
I'm the assistant secretary in the department.
Yeah, I know that.
For all matters related to forestry.
Yeah, but you were not project manager or anything like that on this. Mr. Doherty is.
Well, let me just comment from my perspective, because there's been a small amount of confusion around, my role and responsibility. So if I could just summarise what the four major responsibilities that I've been given, and I think it flows from that to understand the different roles that Colin plays and the role that I play. So I've been brought in as a full-time advisor to DAFM on Project Woodland, and part of that is to work to try to, well, there are two of the work groups which are extremely significant from my perspective. One is the clearance of the backlog, and the other is the review of departmental processes. To which we've started yesterday, a business systems analyst reporting to me, whose role is to map out all of the processes around licensing and the sub-processes around ecology and archaeology, etc. Her plan is in development, and I should have that next week.
All I'm trying to, with due respect, Mr. Doherty, and thank you for your answer. What I'm trying to, you mentioned that you're an advisor. All I want to see under the headings on Project Woodland, it says project manager will be basically a position. Who is project manager? Is it you?
As far as I'm concerned, it is.
Right.
Yes.
Lovely. That's it. I don't want any more. That's grand. Once I know, that's all I want to know. Mr. Hayes, the metrics that's based on the increases on last year were coming from a very low base. Would you agree that if you went back to, say, years before that, it would be minimal? Is it acceptable to be working from bases like that with the projects that, say, with the type of figures that we're looking at?
Well, listen, we're in a difficult space on licensing and have been for the last 18 months to 2 years. I emphasised very clearly in my opening remarks that we are not claiming to be where we want to be. Absolutely not. But by way of indication as to whether there is an improvement in output, I think it's perfectly valid to make an indication with what happened last year. But you can make that comparison without saying that all is perfect. And, I'd like to think that that was clearly understood from my opening remarks. We're absolutely not claiming that, but at the same time, if you take this as a 2-year project, we're showing signs of improvement all the time. Every metric in 2021 when it comes to licensing will be up on 2020. It absolutely has to. We wouldn't.
But should want to be triple it because we're in trouble. Next question. The number of licenses in your system at the moment, you've stated on your submission, is 6119, of which Quilcha have put in, and I know they've put in some lately, 1,842, which leaves 4,277. You remember back when we talked before last November, when you said there was 1,900 licenses, and then you said that there was 2.5. There were no problem that I didn't word my thing correctly. So when you add that up, it came to like 4,300 or 4,400. Sure, we've made no headway in licenses on the backlog whatsoever when you add that.
So I think we had this discussion at the previous committee as well, Deputy. Just to emphasise, we've issued 1,236 licences.
Yeah, but hold on now. At the last commission meeting, and I quote you, when I questioned the information I gave you the first day, and when we brought you in again, when I questioned about it, you said that there was 1,900 that were basically would have to go into college or whatever that were difficulty, but there was 2.5 there was no problem. So far this year, I think it's like something like 1,200 and something licenses, or 13. Hold on, I'll get my figure. 1,200 and something licenses have been issued. Where's the rest of the 2,500 that were no problem? Why aren't they issued if there were no problem?
Well, they all have to go through a period of analysis and public consultation and advertising and third-party referral to interested bodies. The point I think we were making the last day, Deputy, was that if the 4,500 figure, which is now, as you said yourself, if you exclude Queechua licences, 4,200. It's obviously not the same 4,200.
Yeah, we know that, but where are they?
There are licenses issued.
Yeah, but they're not. We're not getting that figure down.
They're replaced by new applications every day of the week.
Yeah, but we're not getting the figures down. Simple as that. Quilcha, if you had Quilcha and Taputis new licenses, I'm taking them out. But what I'm saying is there was 2,500 of them licenses. By your own words, no problem. So we have only issued 1,200 and something is going by. I get the figures wrote down here. So if there are 1,300 were no problem, why aren't they out as well?
Well, I'm sure they're on the way to issuing, or they're somewhere in the system.
At the rate we're going with 40 a week, bar this week, when anecdotal evidence will tell you that this week was a push on. Because you were coming into committee. That doesn't work. That won't work. We won't take that hook, line and sinker, to be honest about it. 40 licenses were coming out for a number of weeks. And we ended up that the whole industry is in chaos, Mr. Hayes. I have guys at the moment, and so has Deputy Cahill, that have 30 years in business, that the repossession guys are taking their machines. So feel good about the likes of that. The other question I have is on climate change. We have missed our targets by nearly 50% for 3-4 years, right? How much ton of carbon sequestration have we missed out on?
Well, so, I mean, when it comes to climate, the average sequestration of new hectares is between 2 and 9 tons per year, okay? Obviously, for the purposes of our 2030 climate targets, what we plant now will actually make very little difference to our 2030 targets, because by the time they sequester and under the accounting rules, they really kick in afterwards. But I agree with your overall thesis. The failure to hit the planting targets obviously does have an impact on climate policy overall. It's not good. It's in everybody's interest that every hectare that's planted, every hectare that's licensed is planted. And I think we all need to work together on that particular one. We obviously have a key role to play in issuing more licenses. Thankfully, the area for afforestation is 26% up on last year. By the end of the year, it'll be much, much higher, we hope. But this is all part of the project. This is all part of the output, is to get all of that back up onto a stable level and to make sure that targets like 8,000 are realisable. I would say overall that, I mean, we are in a very interesting phase as well, because we're at a key stage in the design of the next CAP. And in parallel, we're designing the next forestry programme. It's very clear, I think, to all that significant tree planting measures should absolutely be considered as part of the next CAP and the agri-environment schemes, either the eco schemes, either the AACM schemes. So there will be a number of ways, I think, to come at future afforestation targets that should be absolutely considered by all. That could really be to the benefit of farmers as well. And Mr. Hackett previously outlined initiatives around planting on riparian margins.
I have a few more questions, and I don't want to hog the meat. On your submission, you said 2.2 million cubic metres of timber is basically licensed this year. Have you, since you spoke about, we know that Tinnins is included in that and Clearfell. Have you brought out any system since November to know the difference between either? And when does 2.2 million cubic metres available at the moment? How's it the mills are still running out of timber? How's it they're actually going to Scotland and further afield trying to buy timber?
Yeah, so on the 2.2 million, I mean, every time we issue a forestry licence, it's obviously advertised in our department. It clearly identifies whether that's for Tinian or Clearfell. I'm not sure if I have the exact breakdown in front of me.
It doesn't be in the dashboard, does it?
It's not on the dashboard. It's combined into the two. We do.
Can it be put into the dashboard, Mr. Hayes?
It could be included. Yeah, it could be
Thank you.
included.
Thank you very much. If that could be put in, it would be helpful to us. Mr. Dunn, you might be able to brief me on Coillte Bord na Móna are planting at the moment. Do they get licenses or whatever on degraded bog? Can you talk to me about that and tell me what's your involvement in that?
I can take that, Deputy, if you want.
Okay. Right.
There is an initiative, a collaboration between Coillte and Bord na Móna to look at a very specific project around restoring native woodland habitats on the cut-over peatlands, the industrial peatlands. We've developed a specific pilot to facilitate that. It's really native woodland regeneration. The pilot will consist of trials.
How many hectares in that pilot column?
It's Coillte and Bord na Móna are working on together. We believe there could be, between 10 and 15,000 hectares ultimately in a long way. But in terms of the pilot, they're looking at just a few hundred hectares to see where that takes us.
And did they have to go through, just because I'm looking at it for ordinary farmers around the country, did they have to go and get a license for that? Have they to go through the same environmental stuff?
They have to go further. This will require a full environmental impact assessment, and we're working with we're expecting an application on this soon. We're working with both parties on that. So this will be have a level of environmental assessment that goes far beyond any private afforestation application. It will also be, just for the Deputy's information, it'll be funded only on the basis of costs incurred. It won't enjoy the premiums that other afforestation schemes enjoy. So I think that's an important thing to understand as well. But it's an exciting project. It can contribute to our national afforestation targets. It can offer alternatives for land that was previously used for other purposes. It can be a major boost to biodiversity and climate as well if it's done correctly. But there is a long way to go, and obviously a detailed environmental assessment is the next the next step.
Right. I've two short questions. I've sent in a document into the through the questions that the chairman told us to put in, where one guy was sitting where I am, planted his area 6 months or got his license. The guy beside them with the same ground, same area, had it 6 months in before it. Why is there such I don't know what you'd call it, such work going on that people are being basically, I could be side by side with someone, I could have a license in before them and they could come out. And how quick can you get a license now, this minute, if I put it in?
So without knowing the specifics of the case you raise...
Well, it's gone into you, it's gone in on question, so let's not be saying we don't know about it.
I saw the question, but I didn't see the site specifics, so
yes,
we would need to site specifics. But if it's with us, listen, we'll certainly review and come back to you directly. I don't know the answer. I suspect there's probably some specific environmental feature on one part of or on one person's land that's not on another person's land, maybe an archaeological feature. But listen, we would really need to examine this in more detail before we could...
Right. My final question, Colm, or my final... first of all, I have seen contractors losing their machines in the last fortnight. I will call it very straight. I leave the full blame at the hands of your department. I cannot understand how you haven't looked at something like Bord na Móna. If you look at the Bord na Móna and Tashka case, where you can get, where the High Court has ruled it's an exemption up to 30 hectares, cannot understand how you haven't gone down some road like that. The one question I have, has people considered their positions in there? Has people looked at changing round their jobs if it's not working out? Because I'll be very blunt about it, and in fairness to this committee, they have watched the forestry week on week, and I will come in, John, the dashboard thing, and when you put the commercial stuff as again the tenants, it will be very helpful to every one of us. The one thing I will say is, I don't do things lightly. We're going to monitor this for 3 months. I don't get time that often, but when there's nothing changing and nothing moving, we have to make decisions. Unfortunately, there's a minister at the top, and for the likes of me, the only way that we can try and resolve this or move it on is that a no confidence motion will have to come. It's the last thing anybody wants to do. And I actually pity a minister because it's within the department that hasn't functioned. I would urge you, over the next month or two, because we're going to be watching it. It's not like the 100 licenses can be today and 40 for 3 or 4 months. Look, we're watching it week on week. We're watching it day by day. We're hearing the stories from the industry. I am asking you to personally, along with the rest of you, and all the people you've brought in, Joe O'Hare, I know Jerry Grant is in and a few more, that if this doesn't change, Project One Land, if you read it, is for the future. It's for down the road. The here and now is where the timber industry is in trouble. The contractors are going bust, people that have 30 years of the finest of service done. And we're not going to take that lightly. I'll be very blunt about it. And the only option to the likes of me is take it out on a minister, which isn't right, but that's the only option, to put it bluntly. Is there people, or are you changing around people in there to try and resolve this issue? Because unfortunately, Colin, you were in November, the job hasn't changed. You can dilly-dally with figures for, and yeah, technically you're correct, 10% or 15%. 15% of nothing is still nothing, or 15% of a bad result is a bad result. Where do you see yourself in the next 2 to 3 months? Can you see yourself getting 100 licenses out every week? And you talk about some of those licenses on your dashboard in relation to what's planted as again what's issued. The reason, and it's very simple, I'm a farmer. If I got a license, if I was waiting for a license for 2 years or a year and a half or 3 years, I'm no waiting for it. I've been moved on to other things, so we won't be planting. So I'm just asking your response to that.
Okay, before Mr. Hayes responds, Deputy Fitzmaurice has said things about the Minister, and with respect to the officials, I don't expect you to comment on that, so don't comment. Deputy Fitzmaurice has raised questions there about how you're going to increase the output, so if you could frame your answers around that, please, Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, well, I mean, Chairman, it's exactly as I said at the outset. We see ourselves over the next 3 months, which I think is what Deputy Fitzmaurice is talking about, as delivering the kind of licenses that we spoke about earlier in the year, which is the kind of licenses that will, or in volume terms, that will deliver 4,500 for this year. That means approximately 100 licenses a week. There will be weeks when it's up, there will be weeks when it's a little bit down, but if we can average out at around that, we're well on the way to delivering the overall 4,500 target this year. That is our absolute target. We are absolutely committed to it. There is no shortage of effort. I can assure the Deputy and the committee on that. That's the purpose of the dashboard as well, is to measure output. We're fully transparent on output on a weekly basis, so it'll be, and we circulate that to the committee each week as well. So it is there to monitor and measure as well. We're committed to doing this. We did it last week. We expect to do something broadly similar this week. We're starting to see things coming through that indicate to us that June will be the best month of the year. All of that combined will lead us to where we want to be. So, Deputy, you'll have the dashboard every week to monitor that, and we look forward to engaging with you as that progresses.
Okay, Mr. Hayes, but look, in fairness to us as a committee, that's grand to say you hit 100 last week. The previous 4 weeks averaged 43. And our patience is exhausted, and the industry is exhausted, and the industry is at exasperation point. So, as Deputy Fitzmaurice has said, you have committed there to an output, and we will be watching it extremely closely, because the output just has to increase and increase consistently, not just on a week or 2 week basis.